Okay. Welcome to tonight's Tanya class. Tonight we are studying chapter Chaf Aleph, which is chapter 21. And chapter 21 is a very, very important chapter of Tanya. And not only is it an important chapter in the book of Tanya, but it's actually an important chapter in the whole world of mysticism. We know that mysticism is a world. You know, everything is really like a world. And in the world of mysticism, there's a few foundations and there's a few deep-rooted concepts which apply to a lot of issues. And that is what's going to be discussed tonight in chapter 21, which is the idea of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of God. Now, we discussed already a couple of weeks ago, and how we got into this is to get everyone up to speed. We were talking about the idea that in the beginning of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes that he's going to teach us how it is Karav Ma'od, very near to each and every one of us, to serve God with action, speech, and thought. And the Alter Rebbe said it's very easy to do. So one of the ways the Alter Rebbe explained how it's easy to do, when you realize that every single mitzvah, big or small, it all comes from God. And just like you would not want to get disconnected from God, God forbid, nobody wanted to do that, but when you realize that every single mitzvah is technically a part of God, and by doing it you connect to God, by not doing it you disconnect from God, therefore it's very easy for you to automatically want to do all the mitzvahs because you want to be connected to God, not do God forbid any of the 365 negative commandments, and this way you won't get disconnected. So last week the Alter Rebbe started to explain the idea of Achdus Hashem to show us how really everything, all mitzvot and everything in this world is part of God. And today we're going to go into the idea of Achdus Hashem, the unity of God, on a much deeper level. And that is as follows. So we know that how did God create the world? Now obviously God created the world. He's an infinite God. He does it in an infinite level. We are finite human beings, so in order for us to relate to God and to how God does things, we use terminology and examples that we can relate to, but referring to obviously on a spiritual level, on a very powerful level in relation to God. So you know it's brought down in many places that B'dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu, with the dibur of God, by God speaking, the world created. So if we want to create something, we really can't create something. We want to put something together, so we use our hands, right? We use computers, we use technology, we use things to put things together. That's the correct term. It's because the ultimate creator is really God. We don't create, we form things. But how did God create the world? So with the faculty of dibur. Now what does it mean, the faculty of dibur? The faculty of dibur, like we have speech. So for example, let's analyze speech that we have and we can relate it to God. So for example, we all know that we have obviously a godly soul. We also have the idea of intellect, raw intellect. Now what's raw intellect? The ability to understand things, whether it's in the level of Chachma, Bina, Das, obviously there's different levels, but the general concept is that through our seichel, through our intellect, we can comprehend stuff. It processes data. Now, in the world of data, it's data. 1 + 1 is 2, facts, information, it's all in the world of intellect. Now intellect is something you can sit a whole day, not deal with any other person, and think of thoughts, whether they're your ideas, someone else's ideas. You don't really need to interact with other people. It's an internal gift that God gave each and every one of us. So we study Torah, we use our intellect. You know, even when we pray, we use our intellect for the intellectual comprehension of it. When we're working at something, so we use our mind. But the mind is really an internal tool that you can't really, you can express your ideas and thoughts, but your intellect does not communicate. Intellect is your internal processor to understand things, etc. Our emotions are also our emotions, how we feel. Now we can share verbally how you feel, but feelings, that's an internal thing. You know, sometimes you share how you feel, sometimes you don't share how you feel. But you're always feeling something. You can be feeling numb too. You can be feeling excited. So feelings, all the emotions, that's already an internal power that we have. Then from intellect, emotions, comes thoughts. They can be positive. Hopefully they're more positive than negative, right? It could be negative thoughts. Whatever the thoughts are, they're thoughts. Now thoughts already, what's the idea of a thought? In the world of Kabbalah, the world of the idea of a thought, it creates structure and formation of your intellect, intellectual ideas, and your emotions. So you can think about different ideas and feelings, etc. After you have these thoughts, now the thoughts again are for who? Yourself. You still don't have the ability to communicate your intellect, your emotions, and your thoughts. Intellect doesn't speak. Emotions don't speak. Thoughts don't speak. So you have this whole world that you're brainstorming, you're feeling, and you have all these thoughts that are already more concrete. So far, it's all in your world. Here comes speech. What is speech? Speech is when I can share with you my thoughts, my feelings, my ideas. So speech really, let's say for example, is speech a real quality that I have? If I didn't have to communicate with anybody, is there a value to speech?
No.
Okay, now just to make a disclaimer, there is a certain value to speech because when you talk about something, it makes it clearer to you. But in the real sense, speech is not developing anything new. It's your intellect, it's your emotions, and it's your thoughts. So speech really, the main purpose of speech is, like you said, for yourself.
And communicate.
Communicate to others, right? Unless you stand by the mirror and talk to yourself. But generally speaking, speech is to communicate with others. Action is where you do external stuff. But let's say focus on the speech. So if I have this great idea that I thought about and I feel it's right, and I already processed my mind, my thoughts, all these ideas how to do it, and I want to present it to you. So how do I do it? I say, okay, plug in my hard drive into your... No, I got to make a verbal presentation.
Yes.
And say, okay, I had this idea, I had this, I think I feel great about it, and these are the thoughts I had in it, and I share with you through verbally my speech. You listen. You can agree, disagree, and then obviously that goes into your thought, your feeling, and your intellect. If you wish, and depending on the how much you get involved in it. Now, so when I come and I present something to you, usually the speech is coming from where? From within inside of me. Now you could just, as they call, just talk, without putting any thought into it, or feelings, or etc. And that's possible too. So speech is a vehicle to communicate. Depending on how connected it is to your source, that's if it's going to be a thought-out idea, a smart idea, or just an emotional feeling that you're expressing, etc. So that is what speech accomplishes. Now, we do know speech is very powerful. Why? Because with your speech, you can make someone feel good, and you can actually ruin someone's day also. Right? Speech is powerful. Speech can kill people, and it's done it, unfortunately. And speech can empower people to live a great life, a productive life, a happy life, inspire people to, to study and to connect to God. I mean, how do you think Abraham reached all the people initially, to the first person out there helping people to turn to God? He used the power of speech. He couldn't think of these ideas, and he knew it was the right thing, but he didn't use his power of speech, right? Now, speech has the power to communicate, inspire, transform. That's my key to the world. Now, is speech really me? No. Because I can say things, hi, welcome, come have a seat. I can say things that I disagree with, or I totally think it's false or wrong, because speech is really not me. In other words, if I go ahead and say something, does it mean that it's 100% me and my views? Not necessarily. I can share with you someone else's views. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's me. Why? Because speech, even though it's coming from me, it could be connected to me, and it could be not connected to me.
Yeah.
And you'll never know. Right? You can make this amazing speech that you never wrote, you never thought about for a second, read it off a teleprompter. And you can do it amazing. People can clap, did a great presentation, in a positive way, or you can say terrible things that will hurt people. And guess what? You never even spent a minute thinking about it, feeling it, or putting any effort into it. Why? Because speech could be connected or disconnected. It doesn't necessarily mean it's connected or not. Now, when God created the world, what did he use? What did we say? We didn't say he used the power of intellect that's from within, or the power of what? Emotions, or his thoughts, even though thoughts obviously can also create things on some level, but the power that God used to create the world is what? Speech. The word. The word. The word or the words. Without getting on a tangent, like for example, Kabbalah explains, like let's say for example the idea of a stone is, Hebrew it's called an even, Aleph, Beit, Nun. So the spiritual life force comes from those three letters, and so on and so forth. But let's leave that aside, that's discussed in a different place at length. But here, so when God created the world, he uses speech. Now, why are we using the analogy of speech? Because just like humans, to create, you need speech. You can give instructions. Same thing also when God created the world, so it came from something external of himself, because it was internal, it wouldn't create. It would just be in his head, or in his heart, or in his mind. So the power of speech is what he used to create the world. Now, there is, however, one big difference between God's speech and our speech. What's the difference? Very simple. By us, our speech could be connected or not necessarily connected. It can go both ways. With God, the speech of God is 100% connected to God. You know, just like his intellect is part of God, God's ideas, right? When you study Torah, you're getting into God's ideas, or his feelings is connected to him, or his thoughts. His speech is also connected to him. Therefore, now why is that important? So when God went ahead and created this world, this beautiful world that we have, and it could be nicer, obviously, if we do mitzvot and study Torah and pray, etc. When he created this world, what did he use? Speech. Now, because God used speech, and why did he use speech? Because that's what you use to create something external of yourself, so to speak. This speech that God used, is it connected to him? Yes. If it's from God, it's 100% connected. Yes. So since the speech God used to create the world is connected to him, so the thing that God created, is that coming from God? It's coming, sure it's coming from God. It's coming from the essence of God. So now, this physical world, who created it? God. How did he create it? From speech. So if God created from speech, it's part of God. So therefore, this physical world, the chair you're sitting on, the table, the room, the air, the lighting, everything in this world, ultimately who created everything?
God.
God created it. And God created from speech that's connected to God. So therefore, is there a difference between the infinite part of God, the internal part of God, and the external part of God in this world?
No.
There's no difference.
No difference.
There is no difference. So since there is no difference, so what does it mean then when we explained last week, we'll explain it again, where the Baal Shem Tov says that what does it mean, Achdus Hashem, the oneness of God? Not the simple definition that there's one God and there are no other gods. But Baal Shem Tov said that's simple translation. What did Baal Shem Tov explain? Achdus Hashem means, what does oneness of God mean? The only true existence that exists is what? Is God.
So
the only existence that exists. On the spiritual world, and obviously in our case, in this physical world, everything that you see, hear, touch, smell, taste, guess what?
It's God.
It's God. And now, which part of God? The essence of God, because there is no difference by God between external and internal. It's all from God. And that is what the Baal Shem Tov said last week, and it's explained now more in depth here, that everything is God, meaning to say is every single thing that you see, hear, feel, smell, taste in this world is God. God created it, and it's connected to the essence of God. And how does that feel? You're in God's world. You're wonderful. You're in God's world.
Yeah.
You're in God's presence.
Feel like heaven.
So here's the question. If that is the case, why aren't we so connected always?
Why don't we appreciate it?
Well, you have to be, sure, if you would be
But we
connected,
have
you
to
would appreciate
know
it, for sure.
We have to
Agreed,
know
why don't we
it.
appreciate it? But why don't we appreciate it? Because we're not connected. Why don't we connect? Why don't we see it?
We're not.
How come we don't see,
We have to wake
if
up.
God created it, and it
We
comes from
have
the
to
essence
wake
of God, how can we see tables and people? And why do we disagree with some people? Why is there a lack of peace and a lack of joy?
Because we fell asleep, we forgot.
And the answer is, there's a term called, and I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll explain it. There's a term called, in order for God to create this physical world, since God is infinite, we're finite, and He wanted to create finite human beings, He had to create a situation where we can feel comfortable in this world. And therefore He created the world via, in Hebrew it's called a tzimtzum. A tzimtzum means a concealment of light. In other words, and there's many different tzimtzumim. We're not going to go into each one. We're going to go talk about the general concept. What is a tzimtzum? Very simple. If God was revealed right here, right now, though He's revealed in the infinite power of God, do you think we would exist? We wouldn't be. But since God wanted to create human beings that are finite, things that are finite, places that are finite, time which is finite, God had to create something which is called a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means, generally speaking, a contraction. God contracted or concealed His infinite power, and therefore the naked eye, or the ear, or the nose, or the mouth, etc., sees and feels what? Physical things,
Yes.
materialistic things,
Because God
and doesn't see the truth of the real power, that the real power is God. So what do we see and feel? Materialism, finite things. Not necessarily God per se. Now obviously God did that. So that's why we will see and feel materialism and physical things. We're not going to see and feel godliness. But if that's the case, that God create that concealment, so then 1 second, it's like catch-22. If you're saying God concealed Himself, so then when I see walls and tables and chairs and people, etc., and arrogance, is that real or not real? If God concealed Himself, and therefore we see materialism, we see things that don't look like God, why can't we just say that's not God? Is it God or is it not God? If God created the concealment, that means maybe God allowed for something else to be existent other than God. So as we're saying is that Achdus Hashem means that everything is God. This table is God. Here we're saying, God concealed Himself. God contracted His infinite energy. So maybe He did create something which is not godly. And the answer is very, very simple. Let's say, for example, there's a bright light coming into this room. And let's say the wall was a glass wall. And we're trying to, live a life, but it's too bright. Sun comes out, too bright. So we go ahead and we put up a brick wall. Block up the whole wall. What happens now? No light comes in.
It's darker.
In essence, we really created a tzimtzum, a type of a tzimtzum, where the light cannot come in.
Concealed.
Now, is there the light of the sun in this room? Absolutely not. Why? Because there's a wall that's not allowing it to come in. So when you look at the wall, do you see the sun? No, you see a wall. The difference is the wall and the sun are two different components. However, when God made the concealment, who made the concealment? God.
God.
What is the concealment?
Can't see.
What is the concealment? Godly energy that concealed it. So here, you have to take it slowly. Who made the concealment? God. What is the concealment? Not something which is not God, like the wall which is not the sun. The concealment is God Himself. You got it? God made the concealment, and the concealment itself is God. So here, let's say God was revealed here right now. We would all see God. God conceals Himself, and guess what? We see a physical table. Is this God or not God?
Yes.
Sure, it's God. Because it's not like God created something, a new existence. He's creating this table which is not part of God. If He created a new existence, it wouldn't exist. So the table itself is part of God. So in other words, like this. From God's perspective, the way God views the world, it's all God. The only thing is he dimmed the lights in certain areas. The spiritual light. From our perspective, when we look, that's infinite God up in the sky. Here, from looking from this side, oh, tables, chairs, things, right, etc. Ego, arrogance, right? Here, let me give you another example. Let's say a teacher was teaching a class. Teacher's teaching a class. Now the teacher, for example, let's say knows the whole Talmud, all the Mishnah, the whole Bible, the whole Chumash, etc. And he's teaching students that are first learning the alphabets. And he starts, okay, tell you what, guess what? I'm upgrading you guys. We're going to learn now Mishnah and Talmud. Is he going to blow their minds or what? They're going to walk away learning nothing.
Scare them.
He's going to scare them off. Too big of a light. Too much. You got to teach them Aleph, Beis, Gimel, etc. Now the teacher's dying to teach them the whole Mishnah, the whole Talmud, maybe even some mysticism too. But guess what? Are they ready for it? No.
He has to be patient.
So he has to be patient. So what does he teach them? Today we're learning Aleph, the letter Aleph. And he shows them how it's structured, the top and the bottom and the line in between, etc. Voila. Great. Today they learned an Aleph, and tomorrow the Beis, and so on. And it takes a lifetime until you learn how to read, and then you learn Chumash, and so on and so forth. Now, the student that's learning walks home today, and mom says, hey, what did your teacher teach you? Aleph. In the kid's mind, the only thing, in the child's mind, make believe you're that child, in your mind, let's say you were the student, what do you think the teacher knows? Just Aleph.
That's all.
That's all. Because that's all he revealed to you. Now let me ask you a question. Does a teacher only know an Aleph?
No.
You know him, right? Your dad learns from him in synagogue, you know, Chumash and Mishnah and Mysticism, right? He knows it all. But could he come in and teach everything? No. The same idea. God is everything and everywhere. Just like the teacher knows it all. But does he give us everything in one shot? We're not ready. So he gives us a table. Now if we're smart and we think and we meditate, we realize, guess what? Is this anything other than God? God put it here so we can have a table, we can enjoy, we can be comfortable. And slowly, right, he educates us and he feeds us and so on and so forth. So ultimately, this materialistic physical world, compared to God, does it have really any value? Is this world not godly? Sure, it's God and godliness. So here is the key point. The key point that when we go back to the idea of Achdus Hashem, oneness of God, what does oneness of God mean? The whole world, everything in the world is God. Everything. Not only is it God, it's part of the inner depth of God. The reason why we see a physical world, we don't see a godly world per se, is because God is hiding himself a little bit. He created a tzimtzum. But is the tzimtzum affecting God? Absolutely not. God has it all. And as we're ready, guess what happens?
We'll see it.
We'll see more. Think about it. Let's see if you have a gifted child in that grade. For some reason he has magical gifts, and all of a sudden, he mastered the Aleph within 3 seconds. And he says to the teacher, teacher, I want to come at night to your house. I want you to teach me the whole Torah.
More.
And he can go and he can teach him everything.
Give me more.
But what had to happen? The student had to come to the teacher. And guess what? The teacher will teach him it all. So when we basically say, you know what? Thank you for the table. I want to see who made this table. Like Abraham. When Abraham was alive, everyone lived then. But Abraham said, I got it. Nice world. No. Who made this world? Somebody's making it happen.
God,
before he went to God and said, God, who made this happen? I want to know where the creator of all this stuff was. And guess what happened when he searched out to God? God said, okay, great. You want me for more? I'll give you more. And he gave him tests. What do you mean he gave him tests? He said, you really ready for more? Let me show you what God is. Which was basically a test. Could Abraham, is he ready to accept and say, God, give me more after that? And guess what he did? And he tested him one after the other, till 10 tests. What did Abraham realize? There's one God. It's all from God. And Abraham obviously advanced in it. And once he learned about the oneness of God, He taught it to his children, and his children to his children, etc. Now, as you can tell from here, this concept is a very, very important concept. It happens to be the basis of mysticism. Because once a person realizes that it's all about the oneness of God, you have a lot of questions. Why? If it's all God, then why, how's evil, and how come there's challenges, and how come, sicknesses? I mean, the questions go on and on. But once the premise is there, I know it's all from God. I know everything is God. Not all from God. It's not all from God. Everything is God. It means there's nothing in this world that's not God. So once you get that as a reality, you might have questions, and you probably will have questions. But as you continue to meditate on it, and you study mysticism, and you study Kabbalah, and you study different, authors that wrote from an authentic place about it, and not only do you study it intellectually where it makes sense, what happens after it makes sense? Guess what? You have to feel it. You have to feel it in your bones.
Experience.
You have to experience it. Are you really, intellectually we can all understand things, and we can even understand things that don't make sense, because that's the power of intellect. Intellect is very powerful. But now the question is, not only do I understand it, do I actually feel it? Do I feel it? Do I believe it? Do I live it? That what? It's all from God. Because if you believe, if you understand and actually believe that it's all from God, think what happens to your faith. Is the faith on the high or on the low?
Higher.
Higher, faith is the highest. Think about it. If you really believe everything is from God, that means whatever happened to you or anyone else in the world, from the morning till at night, and obviously through the night, is all God and from God. Guess what happens now? Faith is high. Is your life peaceful?
Yes.
Sure. Because
Enjoy.
if it's one, it's peace. If it's one, it's peace. Is your life full of joy?
Yes.
Absolutely. So in other words, if you take this concept of Achdus Hashem, which is a deep concept, even though it's a short chapter, but if you take this concept of Achdus Hashem and you really think about it, and you really feel it, you will have a paradigm shift in every aspect of your life, every part of your day, every interaction, and anything you study will all be totally different. Your Torah study will be different. Because you're going to be connecting to God on a very pure level. Your prayer is going to be a whole different experience. Because now you're going to be talking to God as God is like a reality around you. Not a God somewhere up there, or somewhere, maybe my grandparents had a relationship with him. It's going to be your God in everything that you do.
Not your father's God, like not your father's
No,
God.
it could be your father's God also, but it becomes your God also. Elokeinu, our God. Yes, Elokei Abraham, Yitzchok. Sure, you don't want to take away anything from your parents and your grandparents. It's theirs as well. But what happens when you start believing in Achdus Hashem, that was a good point, it becomes your God.
Yes, too.
It becomes your God too, because you're God also.
But you say it's a short chapter. There's no reason for it not to be a short chapter. It's Ein Sof.
Exactly, yes.
That's it.
Exactly.
Everything
Simple.
else from that point
Yes.
becomes our discussion, our finite discussion.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right.
It'll help you in your Torah study. It'll help you in your prayer. And every time you do a mitzvah, the mitzvah will become alive. Because let's say you have to light the Shabbos candles. You will see and feel God and godliness in that experience. Or if you're putting on tefillin, it's not just black boxes, as people call it. It's God in there. Not only in there, on there, all of it. Shabbat becomes what? Not just a day we do this and we can't do that. No, we're connecting to God, and you see God in every single aspect of every part of the commandments. Kashrut becomes a natural. I want things that God said is fit for me to eat, and things that are not fit, I don't touch. Speaking gossip. God says no gossip. God says no slander. So we don't do that. Why? Because it's all God. What happens is literally every mitzvah becomes very easy.
Does that mean you can no longer dislike certain political people?
you can't dislike anybody. It's all about peace and happiness. In other words, once you really get this and think about it and meditate on it, you will have such a clarity of understanding what the Alter Rebbe writes in the beginning of the Tanya. Ki karoiv elecha hadavar me'oid beficha ubelvavcha lasoso, based on the verse in Deuteronomy, that you will be able to do all the mitzvot, pray, say anything you're supposed to say, in your heart, you'll have the proper love and all for God, but what? Karav ma'od, it's going to be so easy for you. So it's, agreed, it's a little hard work initially to really get the idea of the oneness of God, that the only one thing that really exists is God. Not only get it, but meditate on it, feel it, live it, then anything and everything you do will be done easily because you'll be connected to the true oneness of God.